So, that's probably enough of that baseline. Following on from like that sort of like just dialectics as a whole in like it's like a raw abstract form. Um, Now I've got to clarify something that's like even lesser known than any of that. There's a lot of people that even like want to fucking understand dialectics that can't fucking articulate that kind of shit. But even worse is almost no one understands dialectics as such. Modern dialectics, that is Hegelian, like method, basically, um, which is the lifeblood of Marxism to this very day. I mean, the good Marxism, I guess, but like the Marxism of the East, Leninism that actually like refound Hegel like consciously and with great effort. Um, Dialectics, that is Hegelianism in that sort of bare sense, like the rational kernel, which is that it is that motion and those sort of things to grasp in terms of applying it. What it is, quite explicitly, at least according to Hegel, but I mean, honestly, there's not really a way around this if you're serious about it. What dialectical motion is the Christian Trinity echoing through material reality. The dialectical motion, that is this like three-form movement of change through self-contradiction, it literally is the Trinity. And that's actually what the Trinity is. So the Christian Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is like the heart of Christianity, is something that almost no one has any fucking clue what's going on there. And in actual fact, Hegel's entire philosophical project was essentially to rationally articulate the Trinity. That's what he was actually doing, and basically he succeeded. And like, you know, the Marxist like sublation of his project was historically necessary and like conceptually necessary. And that is to say that his like direct actual analysis of reality according to his own framework was like bogus, basically. But much more importantly, his method, like the motion of concepts and the way of like actively revealing the truth of the whole through the demonstration of self-contradiction at each turn, that's his method, and that is basically just right. That is like correctly how to assess reality and successfully reveal like actuality and discover truth, and therefore like prove having done so by pragmatically improving based on insight. That's all right. And what all of that is, like the actual motion of concepts and discovery of motion of things, that is what the Trinity is. That is the Trinity. The Trinity isn't like, you know, the fucking modern Prussian state is OP. That didn't really matter that much. What the Trinity is that this form of motion of things themselves is necessary to reality. Okay, so why is this a Trinity? So I mostly explained so much of like this sort of triform structure of like the form into the second form into the third, which is the first and not first form. And that in like bare abstraction is what the Trinity is. So what the Trinity is that there's the baseline, which is God the Father. And the Father is sort of the absolute truth, like the undeniable perfection. He's the certainty grounding all. But due essentially to the sort of absoluteness of the Father, the Father as Father cannot sort of experientially, like, he can't in his own self as his own particular essence, that is as like the all as such, he cannot be the worldly being, because what it is to be worldly is to be sort of like isolated in this manner, to be grounded in particularity, and as such, like in one's own very determination to be limited to merely something. And that is it's quite abstract. It's just like the particularity of any particularity, but like that is as such essentially the opposite of the Father, the total, all, absolute, certain, core truth. That's like the opposite of that. So the Son, the Messiah, what the Son is the like necessary to the Father in order to wholly be himself, itself. It's the particularization or embodiment of that like absolute truth into a worldly form that is in itself actually limited and therefore actually particular, actually worldly. So it's the totally supernatural, like literally like beyond all that could be, itself actually imbued into that which is totally natural, like actually of this world. That's the Son. And then the Spirit is the third term here. The Holy Spirit is essentially the passing of the essence of the Son into man, or into, I mean, really into like community, but like into the world through like the struggle of the Son with the nature and with the Father and with nature, as its own being. And the Son, like having happened, renders possible the existence of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is essentially like it's the essence of like the event of the Messiah having occurred, like being in the world. So this all sounds pretty fucking nuts if you haven't heard. I mean, for one thing, for people who aren't religious, it all just sounds nuts itself. And then for people who are religious, aren't dialectical, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? But Hegel's project is to reveal this triform structure within like the particularity of all things and within the structure of the connection of all things. Hegel's project is explicitly to rationally articulate the Trinity. The Trinity not just as like this abstract sort of like moralistic baseline framework or some shit, but like actually as the appropriate, like most informed lens through which to successfully live and understand. That's what it actually is. Like the Trinity is like the philosophical perspective. And like properly philosophical in his sense, in terms of like actually having rationally and like with great work gone through the ideas of mankind and seen them to their fruition and etc. Blah blah blah. So this is quite explicitly Hegel's project, actually, which is not sort of well known. So Hegel wrote 4 books, none of which are really his most read shit. So most people sort of, I mean, most people don't engage with Hegel. Of the people that like refer back to Hegel, they like don't do the work of going through him. And of the people that attempt to at all go through him, who like even get past the level of like just doing like secondary source shit, reading people talk about him, they usually fuck it up. The people who actually try to go to him, they read the fucking lectures often enough. There's these lectures on history and lectures on all sorts of whatever. But none of those are his writings. All of those are the notes of students, basically. They're notes on his lectures. And they convey his ideas, but they don't convey appropriately his structure of navigating ideas, which is actually the whole fucking idea. So they're kind of useless. So he wrote and published himself 4 books in his lifetime that are his actual like corpus. And what those are the phenomenology of spirit, phenomenology the Geist being spirit, sort of important. But anyway, and then I always forget the name of it. So then he wrote The Science of Logic, the second one, which is like kind of the most important but the most impenetrable, and like in a sense because of what I said, where like he was not actually in his actual direct analysis necessarily the right. It's like not actually the most important. But also kind of is, but I don't know. I'm going to talk about that. But anyway, the second one is Science of Logic. Then the third book, which I always forget the name of, is the third book is 3 books, and what it is. And sorry, the fourth one is the philosophy of right, which is him actually like applying. So the first book is not part of his philosophical system. It is essentially an introduction to the kind of analysis that renders possible his system, and it is like a preliminary like passing through of prior thought that is the context for his system. So the phenomenology is like not strictly part of his philosophy. It's just like a passage through which you like you endure like dialectical analysis and motion and learn to live through it and understand how to fucking read him, basically. Then the second book, The Science of Logic, is the baseline of his system. It's just like the most abstract book possible ever. It's the densest and hardest to read possible book ever because it's just this is the bare analysis of the possible and necessary forms in existence as such, which necessarily are like the undercurrent of analyzing any particularity, like any actual worldly like thinking. So it's just like being, essence, determination, and it just goes through this stuff, and it does it in his way, methodologically, dialectically. But then the third book is like it's like the architectonic, or I think, but I forget what it is. But it's 3 books. So the fourth book is like past his system. It's applying his system. The first book is like prior to his system. The second book is the sort of formation of the baseline of his system. It's like a deep, thorough foundation of like the logic necessary to allow his system. So it is part of it, but it's only partial. The third book is the entire system. The third book is the system. The third book is literally, he was like, I'm doing it now. I've sufficiently prepared through my like phenomenological like display of prior context and my logical foundation, and now I can just do the system. And the third book is the system. And today, if you try to, you can't get that as one book. So people don't realize it is one book, because what it is 3 books you can get, which are the, it's known as the lesser logic. It's like the logic again. And then it's the philosophy of nature, and it's the philosophy of spirit. So it's a triform structure, and that's his system. And you don't really understand this today if you try to read him, because these are just like separate books you can get. But this was one book. This was one grand triform total structure of reality, which was the logic, the nature, and spirit. And that is his rational articulation of the Trinity. Logic is the Father. Logic is the absolute self-certain baseline that allows the possibility of all else. That's logic. That's the Father. It's the first in the system. It's the thesis, if you want that language. And then nature is the Son. Nature is like the inversion of the Father, the inversion of logic. So where logic, the Father, is wholly abstract. Abstract just means like disconnected, like for us, essentially. Like abstract, concrete are words that are important, and abstract just means like sort of not imminently clearly connected to like what's like knowable for you, and concrete means that it is. So abstract doesn't mean like wrong-headed or something. It's like just procedurally necessary towards a later concreteness, kind of. Well, even that is a bit of a Marxist thing. But anyway, but yeah, so the Father is logic, is like the precondition of the possibility of all else. Nature is the Son, which is the worldly embodiment of the Father. That's how Hegel articulates nature. His philosophy of nature is about how nature embodies logic, and that is that nature embodies the self-certain absolute like core of logic that is the Father. And so that's him telling you what like the Son in the Trinity meant in terms of this universal way, in terms of the point of the Trinity being this highermost understanding of everything. That's like how that like nature is itself an embodiment into particular limited form of the universal. So that's how he talks about nature, and it's important to have that context for like why, and that's how it works. And honestly, I don't remember very well, but him talking about nature isn't necessarily that interesting, I found. I think it sort of suffers the same philosophy of right problem in terms of him actually going to reality and applying his method. He's not strictly the greatest like concluder, but that doesn't matter because it's about the process, it's about the structure. But then spirit, philosophy of spirit, and again this is Geist. So this is the Holy Spirit, and spirit is like spirit is humanity, basically. So Geist is a word in German that meant both spirit and mind in one, and that's actually like important to understand. So spirit, when he talks about it, this is in the philosophy of spirit within the Triform System book, and in the phenomenology of spirit, it's phenomenology of Geist. This is what he's talking about. It's spirit mind. This is essentially like the essence of humanity. This is like what makes humanity itself. And the phenomenology of spirit is basically the historically necessary unfolding of different forms of humanity. That is spirit, mind, through this like contradiction-driven motion. So the philosophy of spirit in the triform structure is the kind of the highermost manifestation. So it's the Holy Spirit. It is spirit which like has passed through the struggle of like bare logic with itself through its opposite, its worldly embodiment of nature, and then passed back into itself, having been the particular limited form of nature. And then spirit is this like a sort of apotheosis of the process. And like that's essentially the essence of humanity. That's like why humanity is like the great project of God, kind of. But anyway, so all of the no one knows this shit. So I mean, I'm not even explaining it well. I haven't like really gone into this in that much depth. I just know this at all. That's the case. Dialectics is the practical application of and discovery of the Trinity in reality. That's what dialectics is. Like, specifically modern Hegelian dialectical method. That is the dialectics of, like, Marxism that is relevant today. That is the Christian Trinity. That's, like, totally what it is. Oh, got a dog. Hello, dog.